Hello friends, let us talk about Epithalamion today, the great poem by the great wedding song, the great wedding poem by Edmund Spenser. This particular poem was written in 1595 and it was written by him as a gift to his wife, to his wife and lover for a long time, Elizabeth Boyle. Now, this Epithalamion is actually, as I told you, it's a wedding song or a spousal verse, and it is a poem composed in order to celebrate marriage, and it usually has suggestive language and innuendo. And it is said that traditionally Epithalamion derived from songs which were sung by the celebrants, those who come to celebrate the marriage. So these, at the end of the ceremony and towards the night, the celebrants escort the bride and the groom to the bridal chamber, and this song is sung at that time. That is how it was earlier. And so this word comes from epi and thalamos, the bridal at the bridal chamber. This folk tradition later became a literary tradition, and many Greek poets of yore and some Roman writers, for example Catullus, they have all tried writing epithalamions or wedding songs. So here, as I mentioned, Edmund Spenser wrote this poem and it was dedicated to his wife Elizabeth Boyle, and they got married on 6th November 1594. And this work was published in 1595 along with Amoretti, his collection of love poems or sonnets. And this particular poem is a pretty long one. It has 24 stanzas, that is, to be exact, I should say 23 stanzas. Each of these 23 stanzas comprise of 18 lines, and then the last one, the 24th one, is what you would call an envoy or a short kind of a stanza with just 7 lines. So in all, we can say that it is comprised of 24 stanzas, and these 24 stanzas represent 24 hours of the midsummer day. And this particular day, 6 November 1594, is supposed to have been the day of summer solstice, and summer solstice every year, it is the longest day in the year. And so the poem, it begins. Now in Amoretti, he actually talks about his love for Elizabeth Boyle. That is, before they got married, his immense love for her and how he wanted this union with her. And finally the day has come, and now he celebrates the day of the wedding. And as I told you, the 24 hours stand for the 24 stanzas stand for the 24 hours of the day. And so it begins at a pre-dawn hour with a traditional invocation to the Muses. Usually when a poem begins, especially if it's a long one, when it is a great venture, the poet usually begins with an invocation to the Muses. So here he calls upon all the 9 Muses. The Muses are the daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory. So he calls upon all of them. I will give you the list. You can see the list below. I'm not kind of enumerating each one in the list. So the 9 Muses in all, he calls upon them, and he asks them, he pleads with them to inspire him to properly sing the praises of his beloved bride. And so he says that he will sing about his bride himself as Orpheus sang for his bride. So here you have this mention of Orpheus from the Greek mythology. The woods shall to me answer and my echoes ring. So that is how the refrain goes. Okay, so the opening lines of the poem, it begins like this: Ye learned sisters, which have oftentimes been to me aiding others to adorn, whom ye thought worthy of your graceful rhymes, that even the greatest did not greatly scorn, to hear their names sung in your simple lays, but joyed in their praise. And when ye list your own mishaps to mourn, which death or love or fortune's wreck did raise, Your string could soon to sadder tenor turn, and teach the woods and waters to lament your doleful dreariment. So that is how the stanza goes. It's a full 18 lines. I'm not reading the whole stanza. And so that is what happens in the first stanza. It is an invocation to the Muses. And now the second stanza, it is before the break of day, and the groom tells he requests the Muses to go to his beloved's bower and to awaken her, because she is still asleep. And the bridegroom, the poet Edmund Spenser, is so excited that he couldn't sleep maybe, or he has woken up very early, and he requests the Muses to please go and wake this lady up. And Hymen, the god of marriage, is already awake, so then let's not waste any more time. So he urges the Muses to remind his bride that it is wedding day, and so she has to wake up soon. And they have spent so many years or maybe months of pains and sorrows because they were separated from each other. So today is the day when they are going to be united. So let her wake up soon. So again, another classical figure, Hymen, the god of marriage, is invoked here. And now in stanza 3, the groom instructs the Muses to summon all the nymphs. So he wants to make it a big affair. He's so excited, and he wants everybody to partake in his excitement. So he wants all the nymphs also to go to the bridal chamber to wake up this lady. And they are not to go empty handed. On the way, they are expected to pick fragrant flowers so that they can decorate the path which leads to the bridal bower. And so that when the bride comes out, her feet will not be hurt by the stones, so that she can walk on the flowery bed. Okay, and here, and then he goes on. He calls upon the nymphs of all the natural locales. He calls the nymphs of the ponds and rivers and lakes to make sure that the water is very clear and unmolested, so that they can see their own reflection in it. And then again, he calls upon the nymphs of the mountains and the woods to keep all the dangers away. Like he wants the nymphs to keep the wolves, the dangerous wolves, away from his bride. And in stanza 5, he is so impatient that he is now addressing the bride directly, though she is not present there. He tells her, now enough of sleep, wake up. Sunrise has the sun has already risen, and Phoebus, the sun god, is showing his glorious head, and so the birds are singing, and the groom is insisting that she please join this excitement of the early dawn. And so finally in stanza 6, the bride is now awakened, her eyes are open, and her eyes are now he sets forth on describing the beauty of this lover of his, and he says that her eyes are like the sun. They are likened to the sun with their goodly beams, more bright than Hesperus, he says. And then he requests the daughters of delight, that is the nymphs, to attend to the bride, to deck her up for the wedding. And so they ask her to help her to dress for the wedding. So now there is a second sunrise, he says, because the sun had already risen, but when this his lady love, the beautiful lady, when she opens her eyes, there is a second sunrise. Okay, and now in stanza 7, now the bride is getting ready with all these virgin nymphs around her, and the groom, the poet, he implores the sun to shine very brightly, but then not too brightly, because he doesn't want the tender, the delicate skin of the bride to be burned, to be sunburned. So he says, okay, be bright but not too harsh. And it goes on like that. There is this image of brightness and light and joy everywhere. And in stanza 8, he talks about the guests, not only the nymphs but the mortal, the other men and women, his friends and relatives. They are all assembled there. He urges all of them to move into action, and so the minstrels, he tells them to play their songs. the women play their timbrels, young boys run around announcing that the day of wedding has finally come, and everybody, all those who hear these boys cheer them. And so there is so much of happiness going on around. And now in stanza 9, the groom sees the bride approaching and he compares her to Phoebe, or it is another name for Artemis, or the goddess of the moon. And so the bride is wearing a white dress, and so she's compared to this moon, and she looks so beautiful. She looks like an angel and not like a mortal woman. And she is so modest and shy that she doesn't look at anybody. She just looks, she blushes, and she looks, she doesn't look up at all. And then he asks in the next stanza, he addresses the women who have gathered there, and he asks them, have you ever seen anybody more beautiful than my bride? He launches into a list of her virtues. Now this tradition of describing the beauty of a woman and describing the various parts of her body is called the Blason tradition, the Blason convention, Blason. Okay, and so he engages in a blazon, and he describes her eyes and forehead as sapphires and ivory. Her cheeks and lips are compared to fruits like apples and cherries. Her breast is compared to a bowl of cream. Her neck is compared to an ivory tower, and on the whole, the whole body is compared to a beautiful palace. And now in the next stanza, stanza 11, he moves from the external beauty into the internal self of this lady, and that many have not seen. People only see her exterior, which is very beautiful, but he says that she has such a lively spirit, she's so loving, she's chaste, she's so faithful, so loyal, and so honorable, so modest. And so people who understand her as a person would be awestruck by the beauty of her character and her personality. And in 12, he asks that the doors of the temples be opened so that the bride may enter and approach the altar. And the lady moves into the church or the temple, and in stanza 13 she stands before the altar as the priest offers blessings upon her and upon the marriage. She blushes, and the angels who are encircling, you can picture the angels flying around with their wings. So they have come there to bless the couple, but for some time they stare at this beautiful lady, forgetting why they came there. And in stanza 14, the wedding ceremony is referred to here. And so now the wedding ceremony is over, the Christian part of the wedding ceremony. So till up to the earlier stanzas, we saw that he was invoking the Meiosis and he was following the pagan tradition. But when it came to the wedding in stanza 13, he switches over to the Christian traditional wedding. And so after, there is a priest and there is a Christian wedding, and after that now it is time for revelry. So in stanza 14, he asks the bride to be brought home, and now it is time for celebrations. So he calls for feasting and drinking, and now Almighty God of the church is left there, and now he turns to God Bacchus, Hymen and the Graces, and he asks everybody present to enjoy, to get drunk and eat and have a nice time. And so in stanza 15, once again he expresses his joy at the day having finally arrived, and he is now aware that it's a long day because it's a summer solstice. This day is longer than the other days and so he starts feeling impatient because the day being too long, it is just not wearing off. He now wants the night to come so that he can be alone with his bride. And in stanza 16, he is now frustrated that the day is long, but then he knows that because he can see signs of the evening arriving, and so the evening star has already come up, and so he's very happy. He is urging it to come forward and hasten the time for the newlyweds to be together in their bridal chamber and for them to consummate their marriage. So now you can see how the passage of time, the hour by hour passage of time is recorded so meticulously throughout the poem. And in stanza 17, he tells the singers and dancers and the revelers to leave the wedding, because now it's the enjoyment is done. It is time for them to be together. And so he kind of literally drives them away from the scene. He's eager to be alone with his wife. And so he asks them to take them to the bridal chamber and then leave. Now he compares, now she is lying on the bed, and he compares her to Maya, who is the mountain goddess with whom Zeus conceived his the child Hermes. And so here he is talking about the union or the consummation of the marriage, and also he starts thinking of the next step, that is procreation and bringing forth of offspring. And now night has come, it is stanza 18, night has come at last, and all the guests have left, and the groom asks the knight to cover and protect them. And again he makes some mythical references, and in stanza 19 suddenly he becomes aware of all the possible dangers that might be lurking in the darkness. And so he tells the nymphs and the gods and the moon to keep away all the witches and hobgoblins and ghosts and vultures and all these things. And he again was, as he was a man who had spent most of his time in Irish soil, always very insecure, worried about attacks because the Englishmen were not safe in Ireland. So all that, the ever-present danger, so the fear of danger, even on his wedding night, it kind of looms forth in his mind. And so that is why he asks the gods to take care of them, keep them safe. And now in stanza 20, the groom finally wants to sleep, and he just asks sleep to come when it is proper time. And till then he wants 100 little winged loves to fly about the bed. So these tiny cupids are supposed to bestow them with all kinds of enjoyments that the wife and husband can experience that night. And in stanza 21, the groom notices, that is the poet notices the moon, Cynthia, peering in through the window, and he prays to her also to grant him a very favorable wedding night. And he specially asks her that the bride's chaste womb would be fertile that night. And there was this belief that a child conceived on the summer solstice would bring glory and fame to the family. And so he wants the marriage to be consummated, and preferably her womb, the bride's womb, to be fertile or filled that night. So he longs for the conception of his offspring. And in stanza 22, he again he adds the list of all his patrons. He asks Juno, the wife of Zeus, the goddess of marriage, to make the union of the couple very strong, and let them be together, let them be happy. And he prays that they have offspring, children who would make their name, would take the name of the family into the future. And so he prays to them. And he, in stanza 23, he asks the gods to give him a large posterity, so that he may raise generations of followers who will ascend to the heavens in praise of the gods. And so finally he tells his bride to rest after the consummation of the wedding. He asks her to rest in hope of becoming parents soon. So that is how the poem comes to its climax. He calls upon all the gods to bear witness and to shower the blessings into the union of the couple. And in the last 7 lines of the last stanza, he tells his bride that this song is a goodly ornament to you. It is a gift. It is more precious than anything else that he can possibly give her, because this is a gift that is going to last forever. And so this is what he says, the last stanza: song made in lieu of many ornaments, with which my love shall duly have been decked, which cutting off through hasty accidents, ye would not stay your due time to expect, but promised both to recompense. Be unto her a goodly ornament, and for short time an endless monument. So this poem he hopes will last forever. It would be an endless monument. What he means is a monument. This poem would be a kind of a tribute to his love for her, and as long as people read this, his love for her would continue to live. It would be eternal. So that is how the poem comes to an end. So this poem is undoubtedly a masterpiece. It's unique. It is a blend of the personal and the universal. He talks about the feelings of the lover, the excitement of a man who is going to get married. But at the same time, this is universal, because this excitement is what is exactly the same that is felt by all young men who are going to get married. And so it is personal and universal at the same time. It is sexual because both of them are young, and at the same time it is spiritual too, because he talks not just about her external beauty, but he also talks about the internal beauty. It shows that he appreciates her. And it is temporal and eternal. It is temporal because you are made aware of the passage of time. You know that each hour is passing by. The impatience of the bridegroom is felt by the reader too. But at the same time, it is eternal, because the love that he feels for his wife is something that is everlasting, and through this particular poem he has made it eternal. There is this criticism raised against this particular poem. It's a modern kind of a reading, because as it is said, a classic is a work that lends to various kinds of readings down the ages. So in modern times, some critics say that Spenser looks at this woman as just as any man would look at a female body, about this male gaze, and he derives voyeuristic pleasure from viewing the body, and that the woman is made an object. She is objectified. She is compared to a palace, a building. So all that criticism has been raised against the poem. Of course, you can interpret it as you would like to. Again, they say that it smacks of a very strong patriarchal feudal perspective. So in spite of all this, of course, the very fact that that people still find various ways to look at the poem stands testimonial to its greatness. So as a wedding song, this is one poem that is incomparable in its beauty and its content. And it is, of course, as he said, it is an endless monument. And undoubtedly this poem, Epithalamion, is going to be praised and enjoyed in many, many years to come.